Yeah, come on, yeah, just suck yourself up. Come on.
We got this. We got this.
Evening all, Daniel Hand, RPG therapist, and I am absolutely delighted, privileged, overwhelmed, and kind of humbled to have. I mean, I use the word inspirational quite kind of loosely, but let's face it, Josue, if anybody is inspirational in this particular industry, it is yourself. Josué Cardona. Just obviously, I'll let you introduce yourself momentarily, but we've only known each other for 5 minutes. We've spoken a few times, but the amount of work you've done in this field is, I want to say, second to none, really. Certainly second to few. I mean, Freud might have had something to do with the industry, but on our side, yeah, the geek side of things, I mean, I if anybody asked me to name anybody who's had a bigger impact on this side of things, I think I would struggle. So thank you so much for being here. It's a true privilege.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this because, yeah, I'm like, this is the dream for me, right? To be like, oh, there's a guy on YouTube named the RPG Therapist, and he's talking about mental health and doing therapy and RPGs. And I'm like, yeah, where was that, 15 years ago? Like, this is the dream.
Yeah, well, where was it 15 years ago? It was nowhere, and we can talk about why. It's just it was still being buried with the bodies of the Satanic Panic is where it was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
5e was 5e out 15 years ago?
No, I don't think so.
I can't remember. It was
the wrong person to ask.
Well, yeah, quite. I quoted. Sorry, this is completely off topic already. Welcome to my life.
Fantastic, yeah.
I quoted a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle episode yesterday that I hadn't watched in 30 years. If you asked me what I did yesterday,
yeah,
I would be like, I might have had a cup of tea at some point.
Yeah. It's
but yes, before we go down that route, tell us a bit about yourself, your experience, obviously both in therapy, obviously I'm RPGs more, but geekery more general. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I went back to school to become a therapist a long time ago. But then in 2011, while I was an intern, I had an internship. I was working with kids primarily in a hospital, and we played with comic books and video games, or at least we talked about video games. I brought in comic books from a local comic book shop. We played a lot of board games, did some play therapy type work with toys and sand tray. And then one day I went into like the closet that had all of the games, and I found a Nintendo Wii in the closet.
Wow.
I got very excited. So I went to the supervisor and I said, oh, there's a Nintendo Wii there. I have some ideas on how we can use this. I've been reading up on like beneficial aspects of video games and how people are using, just different concepts. Like it wasn't so much like geek specific, but it was like, oh, people are using zombies to teach history, and people are using video games to treat different disorders and PTSD and simulations. I was like, okay, I've got some ideas to work with. And my supervisor just did not like the idea. And she said, no, absolutely. So that night I went home, and out of spite, I made a website. I called it Geek Therapy, and I started posting, like I just started collecting information. Like in my mind, like, no, I'm never going to have that conversation again and not have research and information to back it up. And so I just started collecting information. A little while after that, I started doing a show like this. So I was like, I'm going to start interviewing other people that I know. I don't actually know any. So I'm going to start looking for them. And as I find them, I'm going to start interviewing them. So then maybe we can find more. And sure enough, within 2 years of having started that website, one of the people I found said, we should just go to San Diego Comic-Con. I was like, are you crazy?
Have you seen how much that costs?
Yeah. But also we haven't presented anywhere. We haven't even done like a small conference. We haven't done any presentations, and we're just gonna go right to San Diego Comic-Con. I'd never been, so it was intimidating. And our presentation got accepted, and so we did a geek therapy presentation, and it was the most amazing part was all of the people that came up to us, and this was now 11 years ago that we gave this presentation at San Diego Comic-Con, and people came up and said, I've never heard anybody talk about this. Like, they don't let me be a geek at work. They don't let me talk about the things that I like. They don't let me showcase the things that I like. And I've been trying to do it, and I thought I was the only one. So many people came up to us afterwards. So that was just the people that were there. We got media coverage. I mean, I met someone there who is now on the board, is a very good friend of mine. And we met at that presentation. So it was such a worthwhile experience to go do that. And I think that really kind of set us on a trajectory to start meeting more and more people and really start building that network. And so our goal has been to advocate for the use of geek culture, both to help clients like be themselves. You mentioned the reference before. That was the whole emphasis. It was me feeling like I was speaking in references and people couldn't understand. Some people could understand me, but the people who could understand me really understood me.
Yeah.
So my idea was, if in therapy as a client, I can be myself through those things that I most care about, that I have an affinity for, I'm going to feel way more understood. And that can help accelerate some parts of therapy and just enhance others. But then on the other side, therapists, it's a lot more fun. It's less taxing. There's less burnout. And the more of yourself you bring into it, like, I encourage people, promote what you're into, and you will attract clients that are also into that. And some people have entirely rebranded their practices to be Star Wars themed or Star Trek themed, or they're switching over to TTRPGs, right? It's like, it's becoming like, oh, I get to be myself in therapy. And sometimes your practice isn't entirely that. It doesn't have to be, but even just having a portion of that, like having a few clients a week where that's the kind of work that you can do, that feels really good if you identify as a geek. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're always trying to build content and information and promoting these ideas, and then bringing people together so we can all learn from each other.
And I'm predominantly person-centered and psychodynamically trained, traditionally trained. And just as you were talking there, the word congruence comes to mind, just being your genuine self when you're there with your clients. And if you're being a geek, a nerd, a gamer, a hobbyist, whatever you want to call yourself, that it isn't just something you do in the background. It kind of I mean, it's a bit melodramatic to call it a lifestyle, but that is kind of what it is. I mean, look, I live in a room surrounded by books. I've got 2 J.R.R. Tolkien shelves behind me. You live
in that room. That's just like, that's it. You have no other rooms in your house. That's it.
I live in the UK. Yeah, you're not far wrong. Our houses are not our houses. Our houses are just not as big as the houses in America, or the houses for that matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is
who you are.
This is where I belong. And to deny that just because other people don't get it.
Yeah.
And as you say, and when you find clients who talk in those reference, who I mean, I've had clients who've seen my pictures and looked at the titles on the books and decided, yeah, I can talk to that guy because of the books he reads. And if you get that connection, we all know that the therapeutic relationship is key to the success or otherwise of the therapy itself. And there are so many geeks out there who just don't feel understood by the world.
Yep. And I also think it's something that's universal, right? Like, sometimes I like to take a step back and use the word geek in the most general term, right? Like, if you're just a sports fan, right? Like there are stories from the athletes' lives, from the actual games, from the trajectory of a season that are meaningful to you, and you can reference those, and they can be inspirational. You can relate to them. If you like cooking, if you're gardening, whatever it is, right? That's your perspective into the world.
Yeah.
I identify, like, I've thought about this. I'm like, oh, how would I identify first? You know, is it Hispanic? Is it American? Is it male? Is it, I don't know, all of these different. I'm like, nope, geek. That's the first one. That would be at the top of the list, because that will tell you more about me than any of these other things. You know, like some people, you know, I'm a father first. I'm a son. You know, I'm a business person. It's like, for me, it's a geek. And if that's pretty high on your list, then again, we're talking about therapy. We're talking about this therapeutic relationship, and just having someone who is, one, either understands that you're really into things. You're pretty passionate and you like to learn a lot about something, and it's meaningful to you. That is important, but also just being curious, right? I think that a big part of being a geek is that curiosity.
Yeah.
It's like, what's that t-shirt you got on, right? It's like, oh, what is that? And so if you can bring that into therapy as a client, that feels really good that someone is actually asking you about that.
Well, it goes beyond interest. I think it's more like a burning obsession at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I mean, I don't even shy away from it anymore, right? Like when a family member calls me because they just left a Marvel movie, they know that they're not going to get a short answer, right? Right? They know that I'm going to give a long explanation as to how we got here and all the different pieces and what everything means. And I love that stuff.
When did you finally kind of, I mean, accept it isn't necessarily the best word for it, but because certainly, you know, I'm a child of the 80s, all the way through the 80s and 90s and 2000s. You did not admit to being a geek. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was at school, if you were to admit to any of this stuff, you know, your face would be on the floor pretty quickly.
Yeah.
What's your experience been like with that? When did you come out, I suppose? And what was it like?
I would say in my house, it was pretty easy to, let me word that differently. My earliest memories are playing video games with my parents. I watched Star Trek with my parents. My mom bought the Star Wars trilogy on VHS, right? They were not only accepting, but they were pretty into it. Not in the way that we would say like, oh, you're a big geek now. You know, my parents don't have tattoos. They didn't go to Star Trek conventions, you know, they didn't do anything like that, but they really liked it. My dad is way more into superheroes now. Like he like fast forward through a movie to get to the action scenes. And, you know, he's like, there's a new Zorro show that just came out on,
I'm sorry, what?
There's a new Zorro show on Amazon Prime. It was made in Spain. It's pretty good. And my dad, like, he grew up, right, watching the old serials. And so to him, it's like, it's so much fun to be like, oh, there's another version now.
Yeah.
You know, it's stuff like that.
Sorry, why did you tell me that? I don't have enough time as it is. Come on.
High quality full series. It's pretty good. Yeah. And it's kind of authentic too, because, you know, like he in the stories, he's in Mexico, but or in California, and he goes to Spain to study.
Yeah.
So he has a Spanish accent, and then everybody, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
And that's a big part of the character, because he's just seen as a country fop kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just,
yeah. It's good. Check it out. But this is a perfect example, right?
I'm trying to work through Bob's Burgers. Come on. I've got Bob's Burgers. I've got Attack on Titan. I've got the Owl House. Come on.
It never ends. But if you're a big fan, right, like that's how my dad is still to this day. And so like we were just waiting for, you know, like, oh, the new Zorro is coming out. Did you hear about it? And even the way we found out was funny. So that's how I grew up. But that was at home. Outside, I was able to make friends easily through my interests, right? So, but there were fewer people, right? It's like I remember in college, I'm walking around and I see that there's a Halo LAN party in the hallway. And I'm like, hi guys, I'm one of you. How do I join this club, right? And then those are the friends that I made. But at the same time, there was a part of me like I still to this day I do not wear graphic tees. I don't even wear like any brands. Like it's just across the board. It's just not like geek culture. Like I don't want anybody to know anything that I'm into. And I think that's just from when I was younger, just feeling judged or getting comments from people about stuff and getting dismissed. So I still pretty much don't do that. But at home, I let that geek flag fly. But to answer your question, the question was when did I come out? And it was in my early 20s when I had left home, graduated college. I moved far away and there was nobody else. Like I had no friends, no family nearby. And I just started really getting back into comic books. I hadn't read comic books in a long time. Started getting into it. And I just started thinking about that idea of like, wow, I just went to 2 different libraries and I have over 40 graphic novels that I have right here. And I'm reading through the entire, like I was reading runs from going back like decades. And I was like, oh, I'm really into this. And somehow like I started looking it up and somewhere I found this word, oh, like you're a geek. And I was like, that's it. That's what I've always been, but I didn't know there was a word for it. And it really took until, I must have been 21 when kind of that realization hit. Yeah. I was also born in the 80s, but it's like, I don't know, there was no, right? Like during that time, being called a nerd or a geek was an insult. So to see that it had taken a different meaning by then, it felt good. And I was like, that's me. It's not what I want to be. It's what I am. And I'm glad there's a word for it.
You've got no choice. That's just what you are.
Yep.
And it's interesting actually when you say that there's still that part of you that kind of shies away from public display, wearing clothes, because I wear pretty much nothing but t-shirts like this, and that's kind of largely in spite of it. It's like, no, people don't want me to do this, so I'm going to do it anyway. So, I am a geek. What are you going to do about it? Yeah.
I don't know why it's more about a privacy issue, because I don't ignore anybody who has like, I will comment, I'm like, I love your tattoo. Like, that's a cool t-shirt. Like, hey, have you, like, I watched that show too. Like you mentioned Attack on Titan. We could do hours and hours on Attack on Titan. It's my favorite anime. And it's one of those things where it's like, how I love it when I see it, but sometimes I just don't want to be bothered in general for any reason.
I know what you
mean. So it's more that. It's different when you go to Comic-Con, because I'm like, oh no, like I want to connect with people. Like now I'm in the mood.
Well, it depends. These are your people.
Yeah, exactly.
I've come home.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll go to events and I'm like, I don't shy away from it. It's not like I deny it. It's just, I guess it's a way to maintain some control. And it's not even the judgment of it anymore. It's more because so many things are like Marvel and DC and video games. They're mainstream, right? So it's very much, yeah. Disney, you ever heard of Disney? It's just like, so some people are into that sort of thing, and just don't have that. Yeah, so it's strange. Yeah, I don't really reflect on that often, but it's more like I'm to take control of my time and what I'm going to do, because we do tend to get into it and get excited. Kind of.
For yourself.
I don't know.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, the way you and I first crossed each other's paths was via your Facebook community. How long's that been going? Because that's the Geek Therapy community, just for anybody who's watching.
Yeah. It's been maybe 10 years at this point, almost, because we started it as a community for our podcast listeners.
Right.
And now I think it's almost, as of this recording, it's at almost 10,000 members, and it's pretty active. And I'm very proud of it. We've tried to create other spaces, but that's the one that stuck the most.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, no, it's great. It's exactly the type of thing that we wanted to build upon. It's like, we want people to ask questions. We want people to learn from each other. We want people to share wins. And yeah, I invite everybody to join that group. And it's like one thing that we've tried to be extremely inclusive. And so it's not just for therapists. Like there are times when a therapist in the group will talk about a case and be too specific about their client. In general, that's an ethical situation.
Those, but...
Yeah, well, that's because we moderate it and we try to take them down as soon as possible, and then we let them know. We remind them, like, hey, this group is open to everybody, because what we're talking about, like therapeutic RPGs, yeah, we can do that in a clinical setting, but sometimes like we can just be more aware and reflective on the experience and have transformational experiences through that game. Through a game, we can learn so much about ourselves, about our friends. We can process things. Absolutely. And that doesn't happen exclusively in a therapeutic setting or in a clinical setting. So we want people to have that information and to share their stories as teachers, as other types of clinicians, other types of therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, whatever anybody is doing, nurses, doctors. What is it that you're experiencing? How can this help you? And it can. We've have tons of stories. So that group is for everybody, and the community is for everybody. So we've, like, in our official position as a nonprofit organization now, we establish we're advocating for the use in therapeutic, educational, and community settings, because you could use this incredibly. I have this dream to go to Congress here in the United States. Maybe Parliament too. Who knows, right? We get. I think this might apply internationally. There have been opportunities.
Parliament's a bit stuffy about anything, so good luck with that one.
I know. I said these are dreams. This is a fantasy. Or like we can take. There are opportunities, right? I don't know when the next one will be, but when like a big one of these movies that everybody wants to go see in theaters, there have like when the Avengers came out, or when Star Wars is more difficult now, right? But like when there were Star Wars movies coming out, it's like, oh, everybody's gonna go see this. Let's go. Let's all. Oh, we all like the same thing. I had no idea. I think there's so much power in that, to show how connected we are. And there's something about, I think it's more powerful to connect over things that we care about than it is over things that we hate. I know it's crazy thinking, but that's what we're all about.
Obviously, you guys are in an election year, and we are as well, actually. But I am always struck by how, as soon as the election stuff starts, it becomes migrants that you've got to hate. You've got the Democrats or the Republicans. It instantly becomes about how bad the other side is. As opposed to what we can offer you. I mean, over here, it's, touch wood, it's been a bit more traditionally, no, vote for us because we can do this. Whereas certainly over your side of the water, it is vote for us because we're not them.
Yeah. Don't you hate this? Side with us. Yeah. There's very little talk about, not even the aspect of compromise, but just at least from my perspective, there's very little conversation or communication to the public about where people agree.
And if you even try and agree, then you're vilified by your own side.
Yeah. Loudest voices, right, are not necessarily the majority, but it's true. It's not a great situation over here politically. Yeah. The fact that we have a binary system doesn't help either.
No. No.
Right? It's only two parties. I think that's a huge problem,
Yeah.
and that
I
is by
mean,
design.
because over here, I mean, and I appreciate we're getting off topic, so I will go back to geek in a moment. But yeah, over here, it is effectively a binary system, but there are other offshoots who,
No.
at key points, can make enough of a difference to sway the two big main parties one way or the other. Whereas when you've got, nope, it's these guys or these guys, neither of them really has any incentive to change, you know, because okay, yeah, we lost this time, don't worry, they'll vote for us in 4 years.
Yeah.
But yes, so taking geek therapy to Congress, that would be a notch on the bedpost.
Give me a few years. Yeah.
And again, like I say, so I mostly look at the RPG side of things, and you're a bit more, as you say, you use geek more broadly. What kind of geek are you specifically? What's your main geekery?
Yeah. It's funny, RPGs, I didn't play my first RPG until a few years ago. My first tabletop RPG. Actually, I had this question for you.
Oh.
In terms of, how do you feel about other types of like video game role-playing games versus tabletop role-playing games? Do you distinguish them tremendously? Do you like both? Like, do you also like video games?
I do. My only problem with video games is I never finish any of them.
Yeah.
I had this conversation with a client yesterday, as a matter of fact, saying that, because it was shared language. He mentioned The Witcher. And I said, oh God, yeah, I love that game. I love the books. But I just can't finish it because it's so damn long. It just goes on. Like, it's a great game, but guys, I need an end. Please, come on.
Yeah.
We've established I don't have much time. But yeah, I mean, RPGs, the difference between, for me, and I don't know if you'll agree, but with things like tabletop role-playing games, you can create the character, you can embody them, and you can direct the narrative. Whereas with computer games, the narrative is kind of being decided for you, and you can only do as much as the creators foresaw, you know. But it still offers you that escapism from real life. It still creates that, as you say, shared language. It gives you the opportunity to be a murder hobo if you want to be, or, you know, I mean, go around and sleep with all the NPCs or not. You know, it
depends on the game.
Sorry?
Depends on the game.
Depends on the game. Well, yeah. Mumble, mumble, Baldur's Gate, mumble, mumble.
Yep.
But it gives you the opportunity to just get away with stuff that you just can't. You either can't get away with in real life, or you've been told you can't get away with in real life. Yeah, I mean, I don't personally work with computer, computer games, simply because I'm not tech savvy enough to somehow get my computer linked up with somebody else's computer and be able to talk to them at the same. Hey, I'm talking to you on the internet here. That is peak performance for me. But Rob, is it Rob Rice? I know he's doing a lot of work with computer games with his clients. I've got a lovely friend, Ellie Finch. She's using computer games, especially Minecraft, with clients. And what is Minecraft if not a sandbox setting for an RPG? You know, just so I mean, what an exciting time to be in this profession, this community. But using a Wii, I don't know if I don't know if I could have done that. Largely because most of the games I played on the Wii when it was the boxing game, and just I was, Jesus, I was dying, but I was a kid back then. Christ, trying
very
to do
therapeutic.
Well, yeah, but when you punched them, you felt their face implode, didn't you?
Video games are my number one like tool as well, and I'd say my number two tool in therapy. I think it's still a lot of talk therapy with very specific, like there's a very specific model for getting at the affinity and the resonance with that affinity, and how, you know, using that within different theoretical orientations to get to therapeutic clinical outcomes. But video games is a tool that I love to use, and it has been exciting to get a lot of coverage. Like big news outlets reach out to us and are like, "Hey, talk to me about this." I've taught a lot of clinicians how to use video games, how to use technology in different ways. Especially once the pandemic hit, it was it was it was I mean, it was almost a necessity, especially for people who were doing play therapy and they were used to having these kind of things in their room. When I had my private practice many years ago, I had a system set up with multiple video games, but Minecraft was a go-to always. And sometimes we're just walking around, right? Or just building stuff together. It was, you know, it's like an unlimited set of Lego.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a fidget toy, isn't it? But it just gives you something to do whilst you're talking, which means that, okay, yeah, you can still talk about these traumatic issues that have brought you here, but your body's got something else to focus on, so it's not too overwhelming for you.
Yeah. And also the constraints that are there, especially if the person already plays video games, and even more so if they play Minecraft in particular, they understand what the constraints of the world are, but then also how deep it can go. So there's again, it's that idea of like, oh, let's tap into your geekiness about this particular thing, and then we can get really far because it's meaningful to you. You have memories about it. It takes on so many different meanings. But for me, tabletop RPGs, it's more about the commitment for me. Like I'm still playing Final Fantasy VI. I'm still in a playthrough, right? And that game came out 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Not quite 40,
right?
but
yeah, 30 years ago, right? And so I recently, you know, like got into it, and I'm like, I don't know, I stopped playing games for a while. It took me 5 years to finish Breath of the Wild, and like I'll go and I'll come back. But if I'm playing a TTRPG with a group of people, that's a commitment that I need to make for a while, and that's the part that is the largest obstacle for me. Because I've played a few games and I've enjoyed it a lot for all of the reasons that you said, and for all of the reasons that people enjoy tabletop role-playing games. But I tend to go back to video games because even if I prefer to play with my friends, video games with my friends, than not. It's really easy to just like connect for a bit, hit save, and then come back later. Maybe I can go solo. But that's the biggest reason why I don't play more tabletop RPGs. But I am very much in favor, and I've enjoyed every time that I've played.
It's a long-standing joke, though, isn't it? You know, who's the biggest enemy in your tabletop role-playing game? Well, it's the timetable. It's getting everybody in the same room at the same time.
I know.
But, and you mentioned the pandemic, and that changed everything. Just, I mean, in so many ways. Because I don't know what it was like in the US at the time, but over here, prior to the pandemic, online therapy was really frowned upon. It's like, well, how can you be how can you be a good therapist if you're not in the same room? How can you do active listening if the person's on the other side of a screen? Come on. Then, you know, as you say, we had no choice. You use what you've got. And personally, I've seen so many benefits to online therapy to the point where I was like, I haven't actually gone back to face-to-face because it just, you know, I found my groove and it works for me. But how have you found the geek side of things impacted by a shift more towards a world, if not necessarily primarily online, but certainly where it's actually got a seat at the table, whereas previously it didn't so much?
I'm very biased here because other than like aside from when I haven't been a therapist, I've worked as in healthcare technology. So I've been aware of telemedicine. Telemedicine has been around since the 90s in like a consistent way, always out of necessity. And when I had my practice, and like it was just something that I always did and always offered. And so when the pandemic hit, I was one of the people who was very well positioned to then help share that knowledge and experience with people who didn't know how to do it. So many questions about privacy and security, so many questions about how do you set this up, like how can you possibly connect your video game system to the computer, how does that work? Right. And so there was a lot of learning.
I'll tell you how that works. You get a teenager in and they'll show you how it's done.
That's usually my first thing. I'm like, do you have kids? Do you have nephews? Are there kids in your neighborhood? Ask them. But me,
ask them why they're screaming at the next door, and that.
Yeah. No, I get just as excited about the Consumer Electronics Show as I do about San Diego Comic-Con. So I'm a big tech geek. Like that is just a big part. I'm whenever possible, I'm an early adopter, and if I can't buy it, I want to go test it out. And I'm always very well versed and up to date on the newest technology. So that has always been a part of what I was doing. And the moment I started practicing, I started combining those two things. I was submitting ideas for scaling different aspects of psychotherapy through accelerators and startups, and I had these ideas and I coded these different things and I designed these different solutions because I could see. I mean, this is a whole other conversation about the mental health industry and how it works, particularly here in the United States, but in general, the access to care. Like a lot of the work that I did early on was with, and this is very related to geek therapy in that like geek culture has its own language, right? We've talked about that before, but here in the United States, there are like I speak fluent Spanish because I was born in Puerto Rico, and I worked with a lot of clients who didn't have access to Spanish speaking clinicians. And imagine, like, I came to work at one place where before I arrived, the clinicians were just using Google Translate on their phone to go back and forth. No, that doesn't work. It is not ideal. And so I think just like geek culture is a language and the advantages that there are there's so much that you can do in terms of like access to care, right?
Sorry, I've got all those jokes of, where you tell people to say, oh yeah, tell them to say this, it means I love you, but actually you tell them to go do something to their grandmother or something.
Yeah. I'm very curious about like how different. I was thinking about this earlier this week, like how different that must be in other, like here in the United States. I'm finally seeing kind of an more of an acceptance of Spanish as a language than a rejection to it.
Okay.
And that's I mean, also possibly out of necessity, but I'm seeing it happen, right? Like the younger people know words in Spanish. There are cultural words that are going into like Spanish. The Spanish language is becoming more and more a part of United States culture, and that's interesting to see. And so I've been thinking about how in other countries, right? Like you have an immigrant population. How much do you embrace that or not? It depends on the country.
Back to the political divide that we mentioned earlier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But because we have it's certainly becoming a thing over here where there are specific, usually charities, but certainly organizations set up to provide therapy or support to individuals who don't speak English. There's one just around the corner from me called Mother Tongue that offers therapy to any number of different language speakers, because the world is a much smaller place than it was back in the 80s. You can't go down the street without meeting somebody who grew up, in conditions just that you just can't get your head around because it's just not your experience. Like my next door neighbors are from Sri Lanka, and I didn't know anything about Sri Lanka until I met them. And I've got Indian neighbors across the road. I've got Pakistani neighbors. We are, in spite of what some in the political discourse would like, we are, just to use your word again, a community, and pretending otherwise isn't going to help anybody. But that's easy for us to say.
Yeah. A lot of people do agree, and I think it's important, though. It's important. Again, part of it is that curiosity that I mentioned before, right? Like, I imagine you've learned more about Sri Lanka because you asked questions, not because they sat you down and taught you.
Yeah, absolutely. And plus, again, that curiosity, we have this thing called the internet, so you can ask questions of him. And I've got books on Sri Lanka behind me now as a result of meeting my neighbors. It's a fascinating part of the world.
Yeah. I just want to comment that I can bring it back to Geek Therapy. That type of...
Did we get sidelined again?
I never did. Maybe you did. I've been on topic the entire time. That curiosity is so important, I think, in the work that at least what Geek Therapy is promoting, right? Because when I said before about the t-shirt, right, about not wanting to wear t-shirts, because sometimes I just want some privacy. My name is in Spanish. I live in the United States. Usually when people see my name, it starts a conversation that I don't care to have most of the time. Oh, what an interesting name. Where are you from? Where's your family from? Where did you grow up? Where do you live now? Do you speak another language? Sometimes I have no problem having that conversation. Most of the time, I don't want to. Right. So when I think about your neighbors, again, I'm just making assumptions, just for the sake of the conversation. But like, if you meet someone from another country and you come to them with that curiosity, there's a way to do it where it doesn't bother me. Right. Yeah. And the fact that like, oh, you've read books on it, right? Like you care about my culture enough to learn more about it. That is so meaningful. And if you're talking about being in a more monocultural space, right, where you don't have differences of spoken language or country or race, ethnicity, or anything like that, and then we all find ways to then bring up other identities, right? You've got that geek culture, and someone comes at you like, "What is that T-shirt?" Like, "Oh, like what movie did you just like? How was that for you? Oh, what is this book that you're reading? You're really into it." That is just so, again, to bring that into therapy, it still surprises me that that's a novel idea,
Absolutely. Yes.
I still, to this day, after 14 years of running Geek Therapy, I'm still advocating for people to add questions in their intake process about the person's interests and hobbies and what their favorite foods are, color, like anything that just like, oh, you're a person too. And I'm genuinely interested in you, even if it's just for the sake of, I think it'll help us in the therapeutic process. Doesn't matter. All of that coming through, just like, and you ask a student, right? There's so much more literature, I think, on education in this, where it's like interest driven, right? Like, what can you achieve if you let a student choose the book that they want to read versus assigning them a book? What are the outcomes of that? And I think there's so much from education that I bring into Geek Therapy and then go back and bring that into the community and try to teach that, because we know these things, right? But there are spaces where it's like, oh, well, we can't do that here, right? It's not a wellness model, it's a sickness model, right? We're taking care of, right? We're curing these patients. We're not working with clients. Like there's language and it's meaningful. And so that can come across in the way that we work with again, I always say clients. I don't know in the
Yeah,
UK.
I mean, it's a big thing over here. We make sure we say clients rather than patients. I've just seen the time chat. We're gonna have to call it a day in a minute or two. But oddly enough, I spoke to, do you know Boone Tarika?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
she's just an amazing person. I love her
I'm a
stuff.
fan. I'm a big fan of Boonies. Yeah, yeah.
And I was actually speaking to her, was it last week, week before? And we got onto this exact topic. It's a case of accept the client as a whole person. They aren't just their symptoms.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
explore the things that they enjoy, explore their life, explore them,
Yeah.
invite the whole of them into the therapeutic process.
Yeah.
And A, that will help build the therapeutic relationship, which, as we know, is important.
Yeah.
But B, it'll just get them engaged in the therapy.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, therapy becomes something that isn't all about, oh, I've got to go and spend an hour sitting across from this person who's going to ask me all these difficult questions.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes an hour to geek out about life and learn about themselves as they move forward. And as you say, the fact that these are still novel ideas a quarter of the way into the 21st century.
I know. A lot of that has to do with how we're teaching clinicians as well, right? Like so much of that is for, and now as more and more of us, millennials and younger, we're the ones that are running the show. These things are changing, but still, so much of that is learned. And I'll reiterate again, right? Like I love the phrasing of the whole person, and then I'll add to that that identity piece from before. Sometimes you talked about like, oh, they're immigrants from different countries around me. There are there's so many obstacles that can create, right? You may not feel safe, you may not feel understood at that level, but if we find something that we do like, right? It's like, well, those things, they still matter, but they don't have to anchor the relationship, the therapeutic relationship, or the dynamic in the room. We can anchor it into our love of Disney or tabletop RPGs or whatever experience, instead of, well, you're white and I'm not, you're black and I'm not, or you're female and I'm male, and we don't understand each other. We can't overcome that. It's like, yeah, but like, what if we just talk about that last episode of Game of Thrones and how it made you feel? Now it's a very different dynamic.
And again, just to nerd out over you slightly, just thank you so much for everything you're doing. And just, I wouldn't be here were it not for your work. I know several other people wouldn't be. I mean, the Geek Therapy community, anybody watching, if you're interested, join. It really does achieve that sense of community. You go out of your way to make people feel heard, connected, brave enough to try things that they wouldn't otherwise have done. And mate, that's all down to you. So thank you.
I'm glad that we're being successful in this mission. I wanted to create something that didn't exist when I started out, and now it's here and it's growing more and more, and we need more people doing what you're doing. We need more people joining the community. Anytime anybody tells me I want to start streaming on Twitch, I want to start a podcast, I want to go on YouTube, should I start a TikTok? Yes, across the board. Yes. Do it. Even if you're not tech savvy like Daniel, just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, just StreamYard. If you want to do something, just StreamYard. Just get StreamYard. You'll be fine.
It's easy.
Josué, thank you so much for coming along. Do you want to do the usual thing at the end where people can find you and where they can stalk you, where they can hunt you down, where they can take inappropriate pictures or anything like that, or just tell them where you work and where they
Yep, all of that. Check out geektherapy.org and you'll get access to everything that I've talked about. You'll find links to the community spaces, to the Facebook group, to our podcasts. We have a forum, we have a library of resources, we have a lot of things that we've been building throughout the years. We've got content there. We're getting more into general reviews and things like that, just to kind of help clinicians get into different things. And yeah, just geektherapy.org and at Geek Therapy on all the social media channels, even Threads and whatever else came out in the past couple months.
Yeah. But actually, because we hadn't actually mentioned geektherapy.org. Yeah, the amount of stuff you have there is just mind-boggling. So,
and the most important thing, we have an annual conference that we're doing called Tags.
Tags,
right? The therapeutic.
I believe I am actually presenting at. Which
you are presenting. Yes,
I ought to get ready for, don't you think?
You should. The Therapeutic and Applied Geek and Gaming Summit. This is our 4th year that we're doing it. So check out tags, taggs.geektherapy.org, or find it on geektherapy.org. And yeah, buy a ticket, check it out. We've got past years' presentations available as well to see. This year we're offering CEs if you're a clinician. So come on by, check it out. It's pretty proud of that one too.
You should be. Again, I only last year was my first, and I can again speak from experience.
Cool.
Just go.
That's it.
Just go, guys. Everybody just go. Josue, we're going to have to do this again, I'm afraid, at some point. So
I guess so.
You're stuck now. Sorry, but thank you so much for coming along, and I'll speak to you soon. And RPG therapists, if you have any questions for me or Josue, please do put them down in the comments. We'll have links to geektherapy.org down there as well. But until next time, take it easy, don't do anything I wouldn't do, and have a good one. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.